The album actually is machine driven, but the sounds that we've used aren't dance sounds. That we loaded up real rock drum sounds, and Neil bought a few guitars and played those on the tracks. And the we found that the songs we liked the most weren't really sort of dancey. And also the sort of scene at the moment is there's sort of so much dance music, and it's so specific and it's targeted so specifically to real narrow categories that we didn't really see any need for us to, go in that direction again. And not and having made that decision not to sort of take dance elements, it was very liberating in terms of the songwriting that you could do. You could write more ballads, more mid-tempo stuff, and everything. It was it gave us a lot more freedom to experiment, and consequently, the emphasis is on the songs rather than on the production.
Another thing about this album is we recorded in our own studio in the north of England, which I think had an impact on the kind of music, because you didn't really feel like you were in the middle of some kind of scene. You sort of felt a bit out on a limb up there, and making it home with my dog sitting beside us and that kind of thing. And I think that made us really concentrate.
Yeah, and it's a very barren landscape, and it's quite bleak up there, and I think that's reflected in the type of music that we're writing and the way it sounds as well. Yeah, this is the first song I think we've written where the riff came first, and the riff goes throughout the whole song, and so the chord progression never changes throughout the whole song. So the verse, chorus, middle section, they're all over the same chords, which for us is quite, but you don't really think of it like that. So the groove just keeps going all the way through, and so you've got three very strong melodies playing over the same thing, which which is something. On the last album, we tended to have some more complicated chord progressions, but on this one, we've tended to stick to simpler rock chord progressions and write the melodies over them, which is quite a change of style of writing for us.
We wrote this song quite quickly after dinner one night. Chris just played that riff, which is actually a keyboard riff, although it sounds like a guitar, started to put the music down, and it was just like we used to write songs when we first started. I just sat there writing the words, and I said, I've got this idea, Home and Dry, and I sang it, put the harmonies on, and then just gradually thought of the words and the different melodies. As Chris says, it's got different melodies over the same chord change. And right at the end of it, Chris said, if you were Paul McCartney, you'd go, we're going home.
Yeah, because what is that Beatles song?
I think it's the first track on Let It Be. Two of us, dee 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 dee, on our way back home. And he goes, we're going home. So it's a little quotation of Paul McCartney.
Auto-tune. We were very impressed with Cher's single, as we all were, weren't we? And so we've just got this fascination with auto-tune. And I like the cross between real and electronic.
It's quite subtle, I think.
We've used it very subtly, but
it's quite interesting, actually.
If you have to sing out of tune to make it work.
Yeah, it's quite interesting to actually sing with it in your headphones, and it's quite interesting to hear the things it does to the melody, because it takes your voice up to a note that it thinks is appropriate, so it makes you do things unexpectedly. But we wanted to, it's not used like on Cher's record. I think it's just a new sound. People of course keep referring to it as that Cher effect. In fact, it's been on loads of records.
It's on almost every garage and R&B record as well, so it's
going
to be here to stay.
Yeah. It's just like it's pretty similar to vocoder, and we've always used vocoders. And it's quite nice just to give a little.
Daft Punk used it to the extreme, didn't they? On
Yes.
One More Time.
I think a lot of the songs are stories, sometimes ideas come from newspapers, or they come from things in your own life. But I was quite in terms of the lyrics, which I think are more important on this album than they were on the previous album. The last album, Nightlife, I think was the best produced album we've ever made, and we worked with 3 different producers, and it sounded really, really beautiful. And on this one, we definitely wanted to make something that sounded more like just Neil and Chris in the studio. And that's kind of threw spotlight on the songs. And so the lyrics seemed much more important than they did on the last album. And so it reflects things in my life or our lives, but also things that are going around. Like the second song, which is called I Get Along, the initial idea came from this thing with Tony Blair, the British Prime Minister, sacking his best political friend, Peter Mandelson. because he appeared to be sort of unreliable in some way and to have lied to him. That's what it said in the papers. I also put into that as well. I turned it into a sort of love story about why two people have broken up, and maybe one person has lost their sense of values, and that's why I put all the stuff in about rock royalty. And again, it's stuff that's around nowadays. You know, you saw that picture of Stella McCartney and the actress whose father's in Aerosmith, and they're wearing t-shirts saying rock royalty. And I noticed again recently there was a point where a kind of rock aristocracy developed, just like before punk, where you had Richard Ashcroft gave this interview in the NME, and he said the big boys were back and we need them. And what he meant was that Richard Ashcroft, Oasis, and Radiohead all had albums coming out that year. And as it happened, all the albums did really badly. But I don't know, this rather arrogant phrase stuck in my mind, the big boy, and also it has a bit of a musical cadence to it anyway, the big boys are back and we need them. So I was putting things like that in. But so it's about, you know, a relationship that's ended because someone has really lost grip with reality. Well, Birthday Boy, it was one again. It was Chris put down this chord change. We spent a long time working on the music, and I had absolutely no ideas for lyrics for it. And Chris picked up the newspaper and said, "All right, here's the title, Birthday Boy," and then had the headline Birthday Boy because it was Michael Owen's birthday. And I immediately thought, and said Birthday Boy, I thought of Jesus Christ, because if it was Christmas, I guess we were coming up to Christmas. I was thinking on Jesus Christ's birthday boy on Christmas Day. But I was thinking about the terrible case of Stephen Lawrence in London, who was killed by racists, and in America, Matthew Shepard, the gay boy who was killed by homophobes. And the subsequent outrage really changed people's attitudes, and even institutions like the London police force was changed by the Stephen Lawrence killing. And in that sense, they become like Christ-like figures. They die for our sins, and the world is changed by their deaths, just like Jesus Christ. And so and the song is sort of structured like a film, in that you see the story unfolding. The birthday boy, he's afraid, and it's the last minutes of his life. He knows what's going to happen to him. He realizes what's going to happen to him, just like Jesus does on the cross. Says, Father, do not forsake me. It's that moment. At the same time, you've got people watching it, the reporting of it afterwards on the television. So the chorus is actually people watching it on the television saying, "Oh, do you remember? We've been through all this before, haven't we?" And so you've got different points of views, but it sort of unfolds like a TV documentary. I think it's a sort of true song. I don't think the view is bleak. It's just explaining something that's happened, really. I don't think it's actually bleak. I think it's true. We were going to mix the album in New York with a guy called Michael Brower, who mixed Coldplay's last album, and he's mixed all sorts of people like Bob Dylan, for instance, and the Rolling Stones. And we didn't want to go to New York after September 11th, just because it was obviously a sad and tragic time to be there. And when you're mixing an album, in fact, Michael Brower's mixing the album, we pop in the studio and check the mix every day, every couple of days. And so we've been looking forward to going, because we were going to have more as a holiday there. It didn't really seem right afterwards like the time for that. And Michael Brower agreed with us. In fact, he came over to London, so we mixed it with him over here. But it's funny because in the wake of that, the song Home and Dry, someone mentioned the other day that they thought it was obviously written about September the 11th. Actually, it was written a year before that. The funny thing about Home and Dry is that it's a love song about someone whose loved one is a long way away. It sort of says that. It is in America, probably, and the person singing it is in Europe. There's a sort of a sense of anxiety about flying, I think, that pervades the song, although it's a very lovely, warm song. There's that, and I've always found that thing of flying back from New York across the Atlantic line about all those dark and frantic transatlantic miles, that it's a very lonely time, that to be flying across the Atlantic in the middle of the night if you can't get to sleep and it gets bumpy, and you sort of really feel that you're really sort of in the middle of nowhere, and there's something sort of anxious about that. I don't know, and I think that is reflected in and there's something, of course, now flying became a completely different issue after September the 11th.
You know, I think a lot of people have wanted to stay in the comfort of their home and the safety of,
Yes.
you know, I've had no desire to sort of get on planes and jet around the world, you know, not due to safety, but I think it's just brought home that sense that you want to sort of be with your sort of friends and family. Yeah, we've been to Russia quite a few times now. St. Petersburg was the first place we went to, and sort of we both fell in love with it immediately. It's it's sort of fated grandeur. It's got everything you like. It's got these amazing palaces and stuff, but it needs renovation. So it's an absolutely beautiful place. But the people are so great as well. And you get drunk to unforeseen levels in Russia. It's amazing how you get. It's just unbelievably drunk, but it's really. And they're sort of mad as well, aren't they? A little bit mad, which is really good.
We launched MTV Russia in 1993, and they had a banquet afterwards, and everyone on their dinner plate setting had a bottle of water, a bottle of wine, a bottle of Champanskaya, whatever they call it, Russian champagne, and a bottle of Soviet brandy. And everyone had that. But the Soviet champagne is so sweet. I would never drink it again. It just gives you the worst hangover imaginable. Although we recorded all of this album in my house in the north of England, we did it all apart from one track, which is this track, London, which was actually recorded in Berlin and is produced by a guy called Chris Zippel. It's not produced by us. We went there when we were going to do a greatest hits album a couple of years ago. We wrote this song called Positive Role Model, which ended up in our musical, in fact. And we went and recorded it with him. And this song was based on a song that we'd sort of half written or 2/3 written, and he had a bit of a track he played, and we put them together. So it's actually co-written with him as well. And he did most of the production work on it. So it sort of fits in, because actually, funny enough, it's the guitar on it. It's just a friend of his in Berlin plays the guitar on it. And the idea for the song, again, it's a story. I'm always aware in Russia, the hunger of friends there to travel, and they can now. I mean, it's amazing to Russians that they can go on a charter flight from St. Petersburg to the Canary Islands in the winter. And they sort of long to go to America or to come to London, and sometimes they do, and sometimes they can't get visas to come here because the British are a bit weird about giving Russians visas. And it's I was just imagining two young soldiers defecting from the Russian army, because you hear about all the terrible conditions of the Russian army, and they get on a charter flight to London. And there's a lot of Russians in London these days. If you have a pizza delivered in West London, it's always by a Russian. and I think a lot of them don't have work permits, obviously, because they can't give them. And so it's about two characters, and they're sort of rather heroic, trying to scratch a living in London, and sort of excited by it, and being Russian and a bit homesick about it and the whole thing and everything. And it's told like a story, and like a film has a flashback. So the chorus is a flashback when it goes to the present tense. We were in London, and it goes, let's do it, let's break the law. And it's just sort of arriving in London. Actually, we know a Russian as well. Who lives in London. There's a reference to credit card fraud, which we had personal experience of. And so it kind of immediately went in the song. That's a sort of typical sort of semi-racist British attitude, isn't it? What do you expect? They come from abroad. And so then Russian, as the Russian would do, is ironically repeating that. What do you expect? We come from abroad.
I mean, I don't feel like that, so I can't really relate to, but I think a lot of the older generations probably, do think, I think it must be because we're in Ireland. It must be because of that.
I just thought one day in terms of lyrics that no one's ever written a love song about email, and it's a bit like Home and Dry at the beginning of the album. It's a song about separation and people communicating through email, and so the refrain is just send me an email that says I love you. Sometimes in email people can say things that they wouldn't actually say. That thing of saying something and pressing the button, you think, oh, no, it's gone now. I think it says,
sending it to the wrong person.
I did that one tonight. I think there's that thing that you can. It says in the song about being able to say something you're too shy to say in real life. And I think that's true. There's a sort of freedom that email gives you as well. You can say something horrible you wouldn't say. You feel less sort of restricted on it.
Well, we've always admired people that can write different songs over the same chord changes, because that's the real talent. When we first went to work with Bobby O, the thing we were impressed with, that all his backing tracks were the same, but he had totally different songs on top of them. And rock and roll, of course, was always based on just 3 chords and stuff. The ability is to write a new melody. That's the talent.
Also, the thing is also how you get into this chord change. This chord change comes really subtly. We were playing this to this hip-hop producer in Los Angeles who works with Dr. Dre, and he said, It's a very tight chord change, man. Very tight. And it is the way the chords come down the scale, and then it ends up the bits. But originally the Western, then when we separated what we would call the Western and Girls, but originally it was just part. But when you hear it in the context of the chorus, you don't think of it like that.
Yeah, I think everyone uses it now. I mean, actually, just for the sort of dictionary section, it's quite handy. You know, the sort of on Sherlock, just clicking on there. It's amazing to have all that information at your fingertips. And I use it when I'm looking for British Airways flights coming in from London, internet bank. I'm amazed really how it's made life a lot simpler, and paying bills and all that kind of stuff. So I use it I was quite resistant at the beginning, I think, to it, but it's just there, and it works.
I think at the moment there's an overemphasis on it. It's a bit like the telephone's just been invented and everyone's really excited about it. I mean, it's a communication medium. I think it's had a good spin-off in that it has reinvented letters between people. People write to each other now, which they used to do until about 20 or 30 years ago. People used to send postcards to each other all the time saying, "See you on Friday night at the Dog and Fox, 6:30." And then they didn't, and they used to finish. And now people have a record of their lives if they keep email. It's quite interesting again. I think academics must be very pleased because if they're writing a biography of someone, there's a generation of people who don't have any letters. And now there's a generation come up again who's got thousands and thousands of emails, and it's quite interesting how people's lives are like that again. If you're writing a biography of someone in the Victorian era, they have an incredible amount of correspondence because they sit and write letters all day long, and they write postcards. And then people stopped doing that pretty much in the 50s. And so people around about then don't have nearly so much correspondence, unless they're almost self-conscious, because they just phone people up. But email has brought it back again. It's quite interesting.
Because there's a downside to it all as well. There's a lot of gossip and tittle-tattle whizzing around
it's
really annoying because it's not, there's no libel laws or anything, and so people think they can write what they want. People read it and think that it's all true, and and then you can get, for instance, in our case, you can get the fans all gossiping, sort of behind your backs about you, and we can look into this, and it can get really annoying.
I used to look at chat sites about this, and I don't anymore. I can't do it anymore because it just drives you mad. Because people, if you look at pages and pages of people talking rubbish about you, someone starts off with some frightful piece of gossip, and then you are judged on the basis of this thing. It could actually it could literally drive you mad, actually. So I don't look at that. And the other thing, the downside is, as a sort of an artist, a recording artist, it's taken away your freedom and your decision making as to how you want your songs and music released, because what happens now, ultimately it gets stolen and put on the internet, and you can't make an event of releasing a single anymore. You can't make an event of releasing Home and Dry and so is going to have the first play. It doesn't matter, it's already on the internet. The whole album's on the internet in various forms. And I resent that. You don't have that if you write books. You might have it if you make films now as technology improves, but I mean, the internet has developed as a very, very quick and clever way of stealing music. I don't mind so much stuff that's already been that you've released, that you've chosen to release. What I resent is your decision and your choice of when and how you're going to release something has been taken away, and it's been taken away because it gets put on the internet by a journalist or someone at the record company or something like that, and you have no choice about that, and you don't necessarily want unfinished demos. You have to be really careful about things. I don't like feeling like that either. I do sort of resent it. I mean, bootlegs have always existed, but now it's so easy. You just put the CD in your hard drive and there it is. So often freedom of information actually does also mean you have no privacy. In fact, this really is the area of privacy I've really noticed in the whole of our career, is the internet thing. And also that people just spread untruths and then make a judgment about you on the basis of them.
Actually, this is the one track which has got dance elements in it. It's got lots of elements of sort of trance music, and it's maybe Neil couldn't be bothered writing it anymore. I don't know why.
I couldn't think of any more lyrics.
I couldn't think of any.
I also, on this album, there's a lot of the lyrics are really important. And we wrote this track, which is it's a very evocative kind of music, and it sounds Japanese, which is one of the reasons we call it the Samurai in Autumn. I actually used a sample of a Japanese instrument. Is it called a koto? I thought it was nice halfway through the album to get a break from words. It was almost like if it was vinyl, it would have been side 2, track 1. It was like restarting the album. And also, the line I came up with, I thought said quite enough, really. It sort of makes you think a little bit. And the title, The Samurai in Autumn, which is a quite beautiful phrase, came from a review of our concert in, I think, Munich. And the record company tend to give us reviews. We don't speak German, so they write key lines out. And the headline was, had a picture of us in the wigs and stuff we were wearing and the clothes based on samurai clothes. And it said, The Samurai in Autumn. And I thought this is a very beautiful phrase. And I assumed it was a comment. They were making a comment on our career or something as well. We were in kind of the autumnal phase or something like that. And so the lyric is really sort of a comment on the Pet Shop Boys. It's not as easy as it was or as difficult as it could be for the samurai in autumn. It's to reassure the fans.
This one sounded
really like
great when we were playing it in the studio at Neil's, and it was very bleak and windy and everything. And I'd be on the phone, mobile, and you could just hear this music wafting over the moors, yes. And it really sounded great in that context.
Wistful semi-melody, a little refrain there. It's sort of warmth and bleakness. I think, to want to be... I think when you're young, maybe... When I was about 16, I used to want to be famous. By the time we became famous, I had no interest in being famous. Because it's pointless. It's absolutely pointless. It doesn't give you anything. I was just reading this book about Bob Dylan, and he was saying to a friend of his just a few years ago that he couldn't think of any upside to being famous. It's just kind of the thing of... you're going to a party and you can when you're arriving at the house you can see people through the window laughing and chatting, and he said to a friend of his, of course, as soon as I get in there it's going to be different. What he means is it's just sort of everyone goes a bit weird. It's we don't have that kind of fame anyway. We've never really sought.
Even when you've done something like gone to, I don't know, some opening, or no, not really an opening, but some sort of, might have gone to a sort of film premiere type of thing. When I get home, I always feel really tainted, soiled.
Yeah.
I feel really, it's a horrible feeling. I can't describe it. And I can't imagine what it's like for people with a high level of fame when they go home. They must just think, did I just make idiot of myself, or in a really public way? I always feel really horrible at the end of that.
But there is a whole generation that's grown up, that's really, really comfortable with West End openings, premieres and awards ceremonies. You'll often hear young pop stars say, oh yeah, we sometimes meet at like award ceremonies, and they sort of buy into all that thing of award ceremonies, and
like the award really means a lot.
Like it really means something.
Like it means anything.
Like it's not just a kind of negotiated thing if you turn up, and I think people will probably realise. I don't know. You see, people who just go through life. I mean, it's a kind of currency, because if a certain level of fame guarantees a continuing certain level of fame for some people, but at the end of the day, it's achievement that counts, not fame. It's probably the darkest song we've ever written. I mean, it was reflecting how I felt about someone in my life at that time. Although I listen to it now and think, oh, what a drama queen. But yeah, and also it was a very windy day in November, and it seemed very desolate. And I sort of felt quite.
It was
desolate.
very fortuitous that the music came along at that time that you were feeling like that.
Yeah, because Chris wrote all the music.
Because the two things just coincidence that a piece of music with that mood came about at the time Neil was feeling that. I mean, if I'd been writing a jolly tune, it wouldn't have really worked.
No, because we started off in the morning, and Chris sat down, just started to play that arpeggio, which runs all the way through the song, just like there's an arpeggio runs all the way through Home and Dry. The sequence of notes, which sounds like a guitar, but is actually a keyboard, although now Johnny Marr plays guitar on it as well. And Chris just built up the music, and I just sat in the corner of the studio writing the words, and then about 5 o'clock I said, all right, I'll sing them. And You know, I've only ever sung this song once really on the record. I didn't go. We corrected a bit of the vocal, but it was all seemed to sound fine. And it's funny though, because when you write something that's personal, it's kind of embarrassing. Um, my sister, who lives next to my house and looks after the place for me when we're not around, came in with some cups of tea, and I tried to hide the lyric sheet from her, and then the phone rang, she picked it up, and I could see tears came into her eyes when she read it. Um, and it's, you know, it's quite difficult really in some ways, putting your sort of heart on your sleeve like that. I think, well, because it's about the end of a possibility, the end of hope. So in that sense, it's sort of about death. And I mean, I actually said to someone on the telephone, "Love is a catastrophe," and the song sort of explains why. And this friend said, "Oh, you should call a song that." And and of course, there's another wonderful thing about writing songs is that, you know, it's a cathartic experience, and you write the song, you have this recorded event of how you felt about something, and actually, it's a really very helpful experience to have. That you know, you sort of move on really. There it is. It's it's recorded for all time, so you can move on. He has. I mean, we worked a lot on this album, and I'd played the guitar on it. And we were very keen on the idea that we could say we'd played everything on the album. Because sometimes with a group like us, people think that we don't play instruments or something, that's all somehow done by machines. I was talking to Boy George the other week, and he was explaining to someone who came up that when we made the song The Crying Game with him, he was very impressed, and he had to completely revise his entire opinion of me as a musician, because we sat down and came to the studio, and I said, "Oh, we'll just work out what key we're going to sing it in." I said, "I'll play it in G and see what it sounds like." And he couldn't believe that I sat on the piano, went through 3 different keys and said, "Okay, we'll do it in this key, we'll do it in E flat," whatever we did in the end. And so we were quite keen on the idea we played everything ourselves, because we could if we had to. But I felt with the guitar playing that it could be better. And one day I hadn't seen Johnny Marr for 2 or 3 years actually. He was in the same studio where we were mastering our reissues, and we were chatting again, and I told him about it, and he said he loved playing it, and so he came up for 4 days and played on about 10 tracks, more tracks than there are on the album. But this song, Love is a Catastrophe, he's just doubling what is actually a keyboard part. But Johnny has lots of musical ideas. So, I mean, on a lot of the sort of more guitar-sounding songs, he's replaced what was my guitar, and he's put a bed of acoustic guitar or a little lead parts, like in I Get Along, which I think sounds a little bit like Oasis. In fact, he came from recording with Liam Gallagher to our session, and he's put in those little guitar things that I or we would never have thought of, because he has that kind of dynamic as a player. And he's really good fun to work with. He has us in fits of laughter all the time, because he's a very good, I hope this man is saying this, he's a very good impressionist. He does really, really funny impressions of people all the time. And he's very chatty and loves talking about music and knows everything about music. It is, yeah. No, it is. Well, it feels good as well, because I don't feel that I think how the way you write it has changed, but I don't feel that it's kind of weakening really. People often, you know, ask you about commercial success. Oh yeah, you're around in the 80s, and you know, everyone has a peak in their career. Again, I was reading about Bob Dylan. You know, Bob Dylan, and everyone gets endlessly associated with it because he had a creative peak in the mid-60s, but then he had another creative peak in the early 70s. Then he's had one recently. So, you know, people associate you with things, and but I could listen to our albums. I mean, this is our 8th sort of proper album, leaving aside dance compilations and the rest of it. And I think the quality of the songwriting has always been good, and I think we say things differently. I think Love is a Catastrophe, as a statement like that, would probably only been made by the Pet Shop Boys. And you know, I think we have a way of doing things that's still not like anyone else's way of doing things. This song, which has a lovely personal quality about it, was actually written from a musical, Closer to Heaven. And in the musical, there's a boy come from Ireland, and he's had a relationship with a girl, and he's fallen in love with a guy who's died, and he's sick of the whole world of the nightclub he's working in. And we wanted to have a moment in the play where the older characters said to him, don't give up, because actually this is your home. This is, whatever you may think, this is where your life makes sense. We wanted to say something positive and warm about the nightclub. Um, and anyway, the director cut this out. The show was going to get too long if we went through this whole plot thing. So we cut it out, but we really, really liked this song. You Got a Home Here. And it's a really, really simple melody. But that was where the song came from, and we felt that the sort of mood and theme of it seemed to work on this album. In fact, we nearly called this album Home at one point.
It's a very, very simple and obvious chord change with a, it's just it's one of my favourite tracks on the album, this one. It's just really beautiful melody and lyrics, and it's almost gospel, is it?
It is a bit gospel-y, yeah.
Yeah, in a nutshell.
In a nutshell, yes. Yeah, I was saying before that a lot of the album is stories based on contemporary life. So, unbelievably, on the second track, Tony Blair and Peter Mandelson crop up. Well, on track 9, Eminem crops up. And when we were writing the album, there was a lot of kerfuffle in the press about Eminem being homophobic. Now, we really like Eminem. In fact, I think Eminem is the major artist that has come up in recent years. I mean, he's a very, very imaginative writer and artist, and sort of an incredibly charismatic performer as well. But the homophobic stuff is difficult. Eminem's defense for all that stuff about fags and everything goes on about in his records is that he's not being him, he's playing a character. And he's representing America and what feelings people have in America on lots of subjects, actually. I actually think that's quite a strong argument, and I tend to believe him. I thought it would be quite interesting to take his method and to write something where I'm playing a character, which is what I'm doing on this. I was imagining that I was the lead character in the UK TV show Queer as Folk, which is about sort of gay relationships. It was very, very hard-hitting. And I was imagining the young kid in that, who is still at school, goes to see Eminem in Manchester, say, where it's set, and gets a backstage pass, and ends up going back to the hotel with Eminem, into his bemusement discovers that Eminem is actually really gay. And so it just describes it bit by bit, how he meets and what Eminem says to him. And then he asks Eminem about being homophobic. He says, when I asked why have I heard so much about him being charged with homophobia and stuff, he just shrugged. And I could sort of imagine Eminem doing that. And then in the morning they're having breakfast and Eminem's talking about Dr. Dre. And then he's obviously never going to see him again. And he's a hurry because he realises he's going to be late for school. So it's kind of a funny, sweet story. Just like Stan is a funny, weird story. I think it's quite an interesting notion to float anyway, because Eminem has a real issue with homosexuality.
Was it what I expected? I don't know what I expected.
I think we thought it was funny, It's kind of got a very gentle humour. The thing I've got into though recently in terms of writing lyrics is, and I'm quite interested in still, is narrative. I've done bits of it before, but not so strong as this. Like I Get Along is narrative, Birthday Boy is a narrative, this is a narrative, they're absolutely stories. London is a narrative. You've got those 4 songs that are absolute stories that you could turn into a film or a TV series or something. There's enough characters in there to make a TV series or a film out of. At the same time, they sound sort of personal and believable. And I think that's a very interesting way of writing. It's the exact opposite of, we have a song called Love Comes Quickly of years ago, which is, love comes quickly, whatever you do, you can't stop falling. I was just thinking about it and thinking, actually, it's not true, really. There's an element of truth to that, but also, really, when you fall in love with someone, at some point, you really make a decision to go for it anyway. to keep saying something, that you sort of make a decision to go for it, and that's really what the song is about. It's a very philosophical lyric about it, and if it doesn't work out, don't blame the other person, blame yourself, because you've chosen. If it doesn't work out, maybe the other person didn't choose that, but it's it's your fault ultimately. You chose, and you've got to be philosophical about it and move on. And so it's the most philosophical song I've ever written, I think.
I think it's an age thing myself. I think when you're younger, you do tend to fall in love really quickly or instantly. But I think as you get older and you've been through love several times, it doesn't have that instant appeal, and I think you can weigh up the options and slowly and consider it and come to some sort of decision. But I really think when you're young, I don't think you've got any control over it at all. If songs only worked for Neil, then they wouldn't have succeeded at all. They've got to be universal. They've got to have universal appeal. So if I couldn't, relate to some of the songs on our music, they'd have failed. No, not at all.
God, no. I really liked Closer to Heaven. It's a very, very difficult thing to do a West End musical. And also, we didn't, there's a lot of musicals, like there's the Queen one and the Madness one coming up, and you have the ABBA one and Buddy Holly, where you have a musical based on a song catalogue by someone. So we could do a musical called West End Girls, and it would have all the songs in it. With this one, we wanted to write something new, where the subject matter was new for the musical, where the way the music was produced was new for a musical, where it was contemporary pop music in a musical. I mean, it was a very ambitious thing. We didn't set out with the subject matter to write something that we thought would be a blockbuster. We made that quite clear to everyone, that we weren't trying to do something that was going to be running in 15 years' time. I know someone might do a production of it in 15 years' time, but we weren't trying to do Phantom. Otherwise, if we were trying to do Phantom, we would choose a subject that we thought would have a big audience, and this we knew a lot of people would have a problem with it. And I thought it was really entertaining. Firstly, a lot of it's a comedy. It's very, very funny. Even the songs are funny. There's a song the manager sings called Call Me Old Fashioned. When he starts singing, the audience laugh because it's funny. And that, by the way, is a fantastic experience. They sing the first two lines of the lyric, which is, I have to admit I'm an absolute shit, and all the audience laugh. It's a good feeling, that. So I thought, God, comedy. And I thought the end was very moving as well. And we really found an audience with it. I keep meeting people. I mean, it got a big gay audience, but not just, I keep meeting people who saw it lots of times. I met someone who had theatre to Don my way out of the week, and a guy came up to me and said he'd seen Close to Heaven 9 times. And on the last week it was on, I was introduced by the producer to a woman and her daughter who'd been 21 times. That was the 21st time they'd seen it that night. And, at the end of the day, it ran for 5 months. If it was a straight play, to run for 5 months, if Dangerous Corner over the road there runs for 5 months, everyone will think it's a great success. It's because of the existence of blockbuster musicals that people...
It's amazing the resistance you get from the sort of theatre establishment. It's just shocking, really. It's appalling, really. A lot of the old critics and stuff, and then you got prats like Germaine Greer and just idiots, and it's really annoying. But it's when you actually try to do something different, and then you get that kind of reaction from people. You think it's quite astounding.
You're really putting yourself out on a limb, because also in the music business, people think it's weird that you're writing a musical, because most people never go to the theatre. They think it's kind of, their eyes glaze over when you tell them you're writing a piece of musical theatre, and. But I think it's a fantastic medium, the theatre. I would rather go to the theatre than the cinema, to be honest. And but also the way music works in the theatre, and hearing other people sing the songs you've written.
It is odd when someone starts singing.
Yeah.
I mean, quite frankly, it's a bit bizarre, isn't it? Yeah, it takes a while to get into that mode of thinking.
Well, you have to sort of go with the medium, I think, as well.
Yeah.
But we're going to write another musical, and Closer to Heaven, where we're discussing a New York production at the moment. And that's why I realised that when writing for theatre, you've got to be clear. You can't shove songs in that you've already written, because they just won't make any sense. You can do it in Mamma Mia, because that's why everyone's going. The story is neither here nor there, really. They've gone to hear an ABBA concert ultimately. But in a proper musical, you've got to write stuff that absolutely fits in, and hopefully you won't really notice the change from from dialogue to music. You should be able to come in and out of it without people really thinking about it when it works properly. And when Close to Heaven worked at its best, it was like that.